This is an Italian style soup that is hearty, nourishing, and super easy to make. I hope you guys love it. Thank you to Our Place for teaming up with me, and let's get started. Ribollita is an Italian vegetable soup that's traditionally made with white beans and hearty greens like escarole or kale and cabbage. Recipes like this date back centuries, and it's a style of cooking known as Italian peasant cooking. And there's a reason why some of the recipes that originated from this time period are still some of the most popular today, and that's because they really learned how to use simple ingredients and make them taste delicious, make them stretch so that they could feed big families or a big crowd, and importantly, let nothing go to waste. So it was a very sustainable and vegetable-based way of cooking that I find really inspiring today as a home cook. And in fact, ribollita actually translates to reboiled in Italian because they would take leftover vegetables and turn it into a hearty stew and thicken it naturally with some day-old bread. Instead of letting that bread go to waste, they would use it and turn it into this absolutely delicious soup. The secret to a recipe like this is that we really add flavor with each step. Like each step of the process is another layer of flavor that we slowly build, and it simmers and just becomes so delicious. So I'm gonna start by prepping my veggies, and then I'll crumble in one vegan sausage. And this really lends itself to peasant style cooking because a lot of times meats were reserved for the wealthy upper class, and the lower class would get vegetables and they would also get scraps. So they would sometimes get a very small amount of meat or even just a bone. And instead of throwing that away because they didn't want anything to go to waste, they really learned how to make the most of that. And what they would do is really kind of glean as much flavor as they could and make that small amount of meat stretch to feed a whole bunch of people by using it as sort of the foundation of the dish. So a lot of times you'll see like soups and stews that have, a ham hock, or they have a tiny bit of pancetta that gets sauteed with aromatics like onions and garlic. And we have so many, popular sauces and soups that start that way. And that was because it was a way of adding a lot of flavor to the dish without having meat as the star of the show. It also meant that that meat wasn't going to waste, and so you could feed a lot more people that way. And so meat consumption was fairly low, and vegetables and whole grains were really the star of the show, and that's how I like to eat. And so I kind of have this approach a lot of the times when I think about vegan meats. A lot of times I think of vegan meat as sort of just like the foundational flavor. So instead of having, one vegan sausage per person, this recipe only uses one vegan sausage at the base, and it's sauteed along with the aromatics. It infuses the vegetables with lots of flavor, and it also helps to stretch your dollar because vegan meats and vegan products can be a bit more spicy than, simple beans and vegetables and whole grains. And so this is a great way to include those tasty vegan alternatives into your diet without having them be the star of the show. And I love that that approach is something that has been around for literally centuries, and it can be applied to vegan cooking as well. The onions and sausage is the first layer of flavor, and then we'll add another layer of flavor with some carrots and celery. The onions and the carrots are also a little bit sweet, which provide a nice balance to the rich tomato sauce we're going to create later. I am going to add basil, so instead of just using the leaves, I actually like to make sure that nothing goes to waste, kind of keeping with that peasant style cooking and that mindset. And I'm just going to very finely chop up the stems and saute them with the veggies. You can add the leaves later on because they're a little more tender, but if you just kind of chop up your herbs like this, you can saute them with your onions and carrots, and it will be super tasty. I'll add my garlic, salt, and pepper and let this cook. And you don't want to rush this step. You really want to let the veggies cook down because they're just going to become more and more flavorful. And again, we're building layers. So then I'm going to add cabbage, the basil leaves, and my tomatoes. I love using Italian tomatoes for this. And then we're going to add veggie broth. I'm using veggie broth cubes, and actually they're called not chicken cubes. They're like a vegan chicken broth. They have very few ingredients, and they're super, super good. If you've been admiring the pot that I'm using in this video, then you're in luck because Our Place is having a huge goodbye summer sale, and it's going on right now until September 7th. So this pot is called the Perfect Pot. I've had it for a little over a year, and it's genuinely the pot that I reach for the most often because I have a Dutch oven that is cast iron. It's beautiful, I love it, but it is so heavy. And I find just in my everyday life, when given the option between my Perfect Pot or that one, I always choose the Perfect Pot because it's very, very lightweight. It conducts heat very evenly. It's non-toxic. It's made from recycled and sustainable materials. So I know that when I'm cooking, I'm not cooking in a pot that is lined with, toxic non-stick coating like so many other pots and pans are. And I also have an always pan and the cast iron always pan. I also love the stackable drinking glasses. I get so many questions about these glasses because they're this beautiful green color, but because they stack, they take up no room in the cupboard. Like they take up the same amount of space as one glass because they stack up on top of each other. So it's really compact and the design is just so sleek and so cool. I also have their side plates, their main plates, and these bowls. These bowls are fantastic because they keep heat in so well. I love to give these bowls as gifts because I personally really enjoy eating out of them because the walls are kind of high. They hold heat in and I hate when my food gets cold. And so this does a really good job of keeping my food warm. So I serve a lot of stuff in these bowls. So those are some of my favorites. I will link all of my favorites down below. Definitely check out the link in the description box because again, you can get 25% off. So I hope you guys enjoy this sale and let's get back to the recipe. So this soup is thickened naturally with bread, but I also like to add a little bit of, is viscosity the right word? It's like, I don't want the broth to be too thin or liquidy. In addition to using bread to thicken the soup, I also mash some of the beans. So most of them are gonna go in whole, and I do a combination of white beans and kidney beans. You could do all one or the other if you like. I like to kind of switch it up just because one, it looks really pretty in the soup, and two, whenever I can, I like to try to change up the ingredients that I'm using to increase nutrient diversity. So I'm gonna mash up a cup of the beans, and they're really thick and creamy, so they'll naturally add a little bit of body to the soup. Then I add in the rest of the beans and kale. I just de-stem this and I roughly chop it. It's gonna look like a lot when you put it into the pot, but just like when you cook spinach, it's gonna wilt down and just kind of blend with all the other ingredients. If you're someone who has a hard time getting greens into your diet, this is a great recipe to try because the greens really cook down and you feel like you're kind of just having like a comforting bowl of delicious soup, but you're really getting a ton of greens in there. We've got the cabbage and the kale, and I feel like the cabbage especially totally transforms. Like raw cabbage has a little bit of spiciness and pepperiness, but when it cooks down, it almost gets a little bit sweet and it really nicely kind of contrasts with the intensely savory broth. And then I'm gonna go ahead and add the bread, and this is gonna cook down and pretty much dissolve, and it's a great way to use up leftover bread because you'll remember this style of cooking is all about using what you have and not letting anything go to waste. And so if you have day-old bread that's not super delicious to eat as is, this is a great recipe to make because it will naturally add a bit of body to the broth just like the beans. I use a wooden spoon to submerge the bread into the soup, and this is just gonna simmer for a couple of minutes. Meantime, I go ahead and make some croutons. Now this is totally optional, you don't have to do this, but I really like the texture variation of having crispy, crunchy croutons on top of soup. Really any soup, but especially this one. I like how it stays nice and crunchy and it also absorbs some of that broth. So I just toss some sourdough bread with olive oil and kosher salt. I like to put it in the air fryer, it's super fast. I do this at 400, and then I'm gonna ladle up the soup. I personally love to serve it with a little bit of lemon on top for like a little brightness and freshness, and then I top it with those croutons, and you've got a garlicky, tomato, basil, veggie soup that's loaded with nutrients, and it's so flavorful, and it freezes really well, and it's great for meal prep. The full recipe will be linked below. If you like this recipe, you'll probably also like my pasta e fagioli. It's completely vegan, completely plant-based, and again, one of those really great, hearty, budget-friendly, old-school Italian meals that I think you guys will love. So you can go ahead and click the link for that in the description box below. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed, and don't forget to check out the link for the Goodbye Summer sale at our place. There's so many great things that you can find on the site, and they're doing 25% off. So definitely check that out, and I will see you in a video very soon. Bye.